Good morning from Vancouver. Good afternoon to the rest of you. I'm happy to be speaking to you today in this format that has become for the last year the format we now engage with each other, but I can't wait to meet you in person again and to see you all and to have the dynamics that we usually have. I wanted to also take the opportunity to congratulate Roberto Montella on actually having us meet more often than we have ever met before in the history of the OSCE over this very difficult and challenging year. I mean, you can just look at the list that he left us there that showed us exactly what he has done and made us move forward in an exciting and challenging way. Since I spoke to you last year, I have a tendency in my report to have to tell you what developments have been made in the OSCE in general. And I wanted to say that the OSCE has actually moved forward very much to bring about gender parity and gender equality as its commitments. And I think as we saw from the Secretary General's report, there is the 2004 Action Plan for the Promotion of Gender Equality has begun to be implemented. And so we can celebrate the entry of many accomplished women into OSCE leadership. Helga Martha Smith is the OSCE's new Secretary General and the first woman to hold the post. In addition, Teresa Rubiero is a new representative on freedom of the media. And of course, Anne Lind from Sweden's foreign minister is a new OSCE's chairman in office. So this is good news. This is moving forward. And I think you heard on Roberto Montella's report that actually we have achieved gender parity within the secretariat and within the staff, and that actually moving to looking at diversity within that gender parity. So congratulations, steps forward. I know I kind of nag you every year saying we haven't moved forward, but I'm pleased to see that we actually had. And I want to, for instance, talk about the fact that the OSCE Special Progress Report is promising better things to come. And I want to welcome Sweden as this year's OSCE chair. And I was pleased to see that the Swedish chairmanship intends to place a special emphasis on strengthening gender equality in all aspects of the organization's work. I agree with the Swedish chairmanship that achieving comprehensive security must entail women. And I think we're back again to looking at how we push forward the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 to bring about women in all of the aspects of preventing conflict, during conflict, and post-conflict resolution. Now, my report for this year, as you well know, we cannot escape the fact that what COVID-19 did was actually open and expose all the cracks that we see in terms of the vulnerable people globally. And this turns out to be women and girls. And in fact, what we know is that because of lockdowns, many women had been forced to stay home, facing sometimes domestic violence in the home, facing a lot of societal violence. Women had been at the forefront of all of the work that's being done. Women tend to work as nurses, as physicians, as frontline workers within COVID, putting them at great risk. And many of them had lost their jobs and had to stay at home and actually do the unpaid work that they had to do, trying to get their children to learn at school and to be able to get education moving for them on top of trying to do their jobs online. So it's been very, very difficult. And then we've seen that many of the women who work in frontline areas within healthcare are actually being paid very little. They work as janitorial services. They tend to do a lot of things that make them very susceptible with very low wages and very at risk. But I wanted to talk about what I'm going to discuss in the my summer report. And this is, I'm going back to what I addressed last year that we did not have time because of COVID to discuss. And I want to talk a little bit about violence against women journalists and politicians. And while both men and women are at risk, women politicians and journalists face additional dangers simply on account of their gender. We know that they face intense scrutiny on their appearance, on their intellect, on their personal relationships, and on their professional credentials. They're exposed to misogynistic and sexualized online abuse. They are targeted for many reasons. They operate in the public eye. They bring attention to controversial issues and that are of importance, but they work in spaces reserved for men, and they are not treated kindly. A 2020 survey by the International Center for Journalists and UNESCO found that among respondents, 73% of female journalists had experienced online abuse, and 20 reported being targeted with offline attacks that were connected to the online threats. In a 2016 survey of women politicians by the Interparliamentary Union, it was found that 82% of parliamentarians had experienced psychological violence, targeted sexual and sexist remarks and threats. 22% had experienced sexual violence, and 26% had experienced physical violence. And we well know of the United Kingdom parliamentarian who was murdered. So we know that this is a huge problem. And many women journalists are trying to work in a place where they are racialized if they come from different ethnic, sexual, or other minorities. In my 28 years as a member of parliament in Canada, I have faced gender-based harassment and threats from my work, especially as Minister for Gender Equality and Multiculturalism. And I know that many women in this room have faced those threats, but they don't speak about it because of fear of stigma, because of fear that they would appear to be weak, because of fear that they would be, in fact, singled out even more for speaking up. But I'm going to give you a couple of examples very quickly. You take the threats of direct sexual violence against female opposition activists in Belarus, including Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, and the relentless racist and sexist online campaigns against Diane Abbott, the first Black woman elected to the United Kingdom's parliament, and the harassment perpetrated by fellow politicians and the online abuse against Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez in the United States. These things are becoming worse. They're becoming violent. They're sexual. They are threatening sexual violence. It's something that sadly tells us that we are looking not at moving women into political life, not at moving women into journalistic ability and into public service. They're going to retire. Many of them shut down their social media. Many of them go backwards. They climb back from making statements. They are afraid. They are scared. Many of them self-censor. Many of them chose to leave journalism and not run as parliamentarians. What does that leave our young women who want to become parliamentarians and journalists? And I think one of the things I'm hoping that we can do is not only bring attention to the problem, but let's look at how we can act against it, how we can stop this culture of silence, stigma, and impunity that's associated with gender-based violence. And so I just want to highlight a few things that we can do. We can speak publicly in support of colleagues who are being targeted. And I'm appealing to all our male colleagues here. Speak up for us, speak out, champion policies and laws that encourage women to report instances of sexual harassment and assault, and provide effective remedies. Actually do action. Update our laws to recognize and address the harms caused by online abuse. Demand that law enforcement improves their response to threats and violence against women politicians and journalists. And I am again appealing for all of you in this room that are men to be our allies, to stand up for us, to speak out, to make sure that our profession as parliamentarians remains one of dignity, one of service, one in which we are going to show that we are ethical people and that we can speak forward. So I just wanted to end with that and to say that I will continue this discussion in Bucharest. I am hoping that we can actually come up with a lot of work that we can do and talk about in terms of actual activity and actual plan of action. And I mean, I want to also congratulate Odir for actually working to promote women's equal political participation and help young women to feel safe in this very honorable profession that we participate in as politicians. Thank you very much.